What does remote investing look like? Stay tuned. Welcome to this week's edition of NoteSchool TV, episode 233. And this week, we do have an amazing guest who had to get up really early today to do this interview. We'll get to her in just a minute. But before we do, let's just take care of some housekeeping. Number one, make sure and like this episode. And as you like it, make sure and share it with your friends and your family and your business associates, everybody that you know. Number two, if you have not already subscribed to NoteSchool TV channel, make sure and do that. And then lastly, hit that bell notification. Bing, yes, go ahead and hit that so you'll be notified when we go live. When? Every Wednesday at 11:05 Central Time. Also, if you'd like to know more about what we do at NoteSchool, simply go to noteschool.com/TV. Again, noteschool.com/TV. And with that, I am going to bring on NoteSchool's founder, our chief visionary officer, all-around good guy, world traveler, Mr. Eddie Speed.
Hello, Joe.
Hello. Eddie's been, well, all over the U.S., right? Not so much the world, but
yeah. I wouldn't say world traveler, but I have seen both coasts and a lot of stuff in between here in the past couple of months.
That's right.
I would say that, Joe, I feel very confident in saying that it ain't a secret anymore that we're in a note cycle.
Yes, we are.
Much to be said about that. And our guest today, I think, is going to give us a little bit of an indication of that. And she does live in a unique place, and we'll talk about that when we bring her on. So very excited today. And Joe, I am very excited about what we're doing. This is my 45th year in the business, and I'm always enjoyed the business, and I've always been excited to get up and go do it. But I'm extremely excited about where the market's taking us right now.
You know, Eddie, I was thinking about that, and it's like we get, we say this a lot, right? But then it just keeps getting a little higher and a little better and a little better and a little better. And we're sitting in the, what they used to say, Eddie, in the catbird. That.
Well, Joe, here, let me just say this. I won another award.
I know.
It is heavy.
It's heavy.
Really
I
heavy.
know. Wayne sent you a picture yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so anyway.
I was listening in the background yesterday.
It's pretty funny.
All
Now,
right, I am going to drop off and come back on the end of the show. You and Kathleen have a great interview. I know it'll be wonderful.
All right. Well, I'm very excited to have our guest today. And as Joe mentioned, she had to get up kind of early to make the call because she lives in a different time zone. And we'll talk about that. You guys welcome Kathleen Chin. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I am good. Like you said, it is early in the morning. I think the light is just coming out.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad the light's coming out. Where do you live?
I live in Honolulu, Hawaii.
I love it. I love it. My wife made me to make a field trip over there, if you know what I mean, right? No, it's you live in a great place. We're going to talk a little bit about your journey. And I think it's very interesting to say, Kathleen, that your journey is not affected by where you live. We'll start with that, right?
That is correct. We just live in our time zones.
That's it. And we buy deals where good deals exist, right? So one of the things that I think really matters is the fact that you can do this business from where you choose to live, and you can buy deals from where you choose that the best opportunities. And so I appreciate you getting up early and sharing with the audience this morning. So thank you for that. And we're going to talk a little bit about it. So I want to hear a little bit about what you've done in real estate investing kind of prior to joining NoteSchool.
Okay, well, I actually started investing right as I entered college. My mother gave me money and she said, "You're going to use this for college." So that was stocks at that time. So that was the
Mhm.
very start of it. And then from there, I purchased more stocks, real estate. And then in the last, I would say 15 years, I did private lending, foreclosures, purchasing those, fixing and flipping them, um, selling them, and then also gaining a rental portfolio as well. So
Okay.
that's where I started. And then about 2 years ago, I heard about NoteSchool and I kind of listened and that sort of thing and read some of the articles. And then I joined in February of this year.
Awesome. Well, welcome to Note School. We're glad to have you.
Thank
Uh,
you.
I want to talk, we talk a lot about kind of the battle today between rentals and seller financing, right? And so you mentioned rentals. Talk a little bit about your rentals. And not everybody has a terrible experience with rentals. Not everybody has the house was torn down when I got back to it kind of thing. So what was your story on rentals?
My rentals are actually all condos here in
Mhm.
Hawaii.
Okay.
So I didn't have a lot of the maintenance issues. They were usually just small, sort of cosmetic kind of things.
Uh-huh.
But the biggest thing that happened over the years is that the costs continued to go up, which is really our hurricane insurance, fire insurance, and property, not as much property tax, but really the insurance. So as
Uh-huh.
that started to increase, there just is not much cash flow. So your only investment strategy at this point is really appreciation. You're looking for that. And of course, we have that in Hawaii. But as we all know, appreciation is down the road, not here and now.
Yeah, and there's different cycles for different levels of appreciation, right? We don't seem to be in an appreciation cycle at the moment that we were in the early, right after the virus, right? So it's the statistics are not leading us to believe there's going to be a giant lift like there was in the past, right? So what happens is people's expenses, the lift in expenses doesn't match the lift we saw in rents. Is that kind of what you're talking about, where it's not cash flowing?
That's correct. Yeah. So what we're seeing is the HOAs, the association dues continue to go up as their costs go up.
Yeah. Yeah, everything's just, we see it in the grocery store, right? Martha, my wife, went to the grocery store on Sunday and came back home and says, I didn't buy very much for $350, right?
That
And
is
we all live that, right? We're like, so it costs more. We've seen expenses, and this is a national average, so it may not be exactly your story in their situation, but nationally, expenses have rose about 50%. Rents have rose about 20%. So once again, this is why the normal conversation we have with somebody that's had rentals is they're just not making the money they were making, right? So we'll circle back on that. We'll talk about like what are the possibilities with that, and does that make sense? I want to talk a little bit about kind of your journey in learning about notes overall. So you talked about the fact that we got under your radar about 2 years ago. You ended up coming to a class, and I want to talk about that. Like, what did that class look like, and like, why did it change your trajectory of how you saw investing?
So I took that first class in November of last year, and I started listening and I thought, wow, this is another strategy, another way to expand a portfolio. And that's kind of where my interest came in. Also, I have a mortgage license, so it all made sense to me in the
Mhm.
mortgage world.
Yeah. I want to talk about financial modeling. I think the class is very focused on what we refer to as financial modeling, right? How to make your money work harder, and knowing how to kind of configure structuring a deal and using creative finance around it. That's not normal to the regular mortgage business, right?
No.
And so when people start seeing that, they start realizing you don't have to start out with millions of dollars to go on millions of dollars worth of notes, right? All right. So Kathleen, let's talk about that. Like when we say financial modeling, a lot of it becomes, it's not just your money that buys a note, correct?
That is correct.
You can use other people's money to buy a note. And a lot of times what we find is the source of that money is somebody that's kind of frustrated with landlording, kind of like you're frustrated they're not cash flowing the way they were, right? And so then all of a sudden you start realizing maybe you buy $1 million worth of notes, but you don't need $1 million in your checking account to do it.
That is correct. Yeah. The power of a good debt, as we say.
Good. Exactly. And it doesn't even have to be debt. It could be debt. You could borrow money against a note, but you could just sell a piece of the note to them.
Yep.
Yeah. What do you think attracted you to notes?
What attracted me is, again, just a different way to look at investing. The different strategies. Like you said, you could borrow, you could pledge, you could sell part of your note if you don't need that cash flow right away. You can sell the front end of that note so that later on, let's say 5-10 years down the road, you do have that cash flow.
I have a long friend that's a real estate investor, and he used to do a good amount of training. And he would introduce me to his audiences on an occasion. And he would introduce me and he says, "This is Eddie Speed. He's a note guy. Now, let me tell you about notes. Every real estate investor wants to grow up and be a note guy." You think that's true?
No, because
You
they
don't?
don't know what they are.
They
don't know what they are. Yeah.
But if they knew, would they do that? Would they grow up and be a note person?
I think so.
I do too. I do too, because we only know what we know until we learn different. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk about in the class is really becoming the bank and having cash flow, a lot more cash flow than you're seeing out of rentals. I want to kind of go back to when you first came to that class and we started kind of modeling that out. Where did you fit in the scope of that?
I really was looking at purchasing performing notes initially to start the cash flow. If I was going to do any debt, I wanted to have enough cash to pay off any debt, and then move into non-performing notes and creative financing to eventually take some of my rentals and sell them, and then look at the possibility of creative financing and doing a seller finance.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I think the timing for selling your rentals and owner financing them probably is as good as it can be, right? Usually your net income on seller financing, the identical property that you're renting right now, is 2.5 to 3 times the net income. That's pretty good, huh?
Yes, it is.
I've got that's why I was laughing, telling Joe I've been around the country and I've won a few awards here in the past month or so. And it's really because I call it the battle between rentals versus seller financing. And I'm showing people the math, and you've seen it, of course. And it's just pretty overwhelming. But you've already bought your first note.
I did about 2 weeks ago.
Tell me about it.
Well, I think Monica sent out an email and said, "We've got some notes." And I said, "I want one." And she said, "Oh, they were all sold or something, or taken." And then another set of notes came in, and I said, "Put me on the list." And I think that was about 3 weeks ago. And then last 2 weeks ago, I purchased the note, and I should expect a payment, I think, today.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where was the property?
In Indiana.
Indiana. Yep.
Indianapolis.
What was the property worth?
I believe it's $150,000.
Okay.
And the note that I purchased was for $80,000.
You funded $80,000 against a $150,000 house.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You know how far it is from? That's in Indianapolis, right?
That is.
You have any clue how far it is from Indianapolis to Honolulu?
It is a flight from Honolulu direct to Denver, and then Denver to Indianapolis. There is no direct flight.
And the answer is
It's a long ways away.
And the answer is it didn't matter, did it?
It did not matter.
So you funded $80,000. What's your payment?
My payment is $1,559.
You funded $80,000 and your payment is $1,500 a month.
That is correct.
I guess any rental today would do that math, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You know, there's a couple of things that we say about buying notes versus rentals. First of all, there's a cushion factor, right? If you buy a rental and the rental's worth $150,000, you pay $150,000. If something goes wrong, you got no cushion on the rental side, right? But in this case, you funded $80,000 and the property is worth $150,000. You have a $70,000 cushion between what you paid for the note and what the collateral is worth. God forbid something goes wrong.
Yes, that's correct. So
the other thing is cash flow, right? You funded $80,000 and you're getting $1,500 a month, versus if you bought a $150,000 rental. Let's be honest about it. You'd probably net $600 or $700 a month. Just cash to cash investments. So that's why, those are reasons that I think people like you consistently are saying, I like notes. The math is pretty overwhelming.
And that's pretty much it. When I went to that first class and saw the difference between renting and having a note. Yes.
You think it's easier to own a note than a rental?
Oh, absolutely. I just got a call yesterday. Our air conditioner went out and then they're going away. So I had to scramble, got an air conditioner contractor to go in and go ahead and find out what's happening with that.
Yeah. It's a riddle. So once again, it's just a number I made up after talking to thousands of people that have had rentals and now have had notes, right? But I say that you can own 1,000 notes or 55 rentals for the same amount of work.
I would agree. Yes.
So for those reasons, you're switching from not necessarily in real estate investing, but real estate related investing. Notes are related to real estate, but you don't physically have to own the real estate to make good money, right?
That's right. And, to just be basically the bank.
They say it's the tallest building in every town. Kathleen, I want to talk about something that's really important. And that is your vision now that you've come to a class, now that you've joined our membership, now that you're what we would say you're in the tribe, right? And so now all of a sudden we keep fortifying this idea of building legacy. And I want to talk about that and kind of what you've learned about it and now what your vision of what that can look like for you.
Well, in terms of a legacy, so I have 3 children, and what I have always taught them was what my mother had taught me, which is having a mindset of investing and looking past just what they have now. So that's kind of what I pass on to them. So in terms of a legacy, the legacy would be, what I've done and share that with them, but then give them the opportunities to kind of build their own investment path. So that's kind of how I look at the legacy.
Well, and you've seen kind of, you've seen my family story a little bit, and I have 3 kids, right? None of which their primary income is in note investing, right? But they all are investing and building legacy with notes. So it means that my daughter can be a ballet dancer, my son can be a fireman, my other son can be a salesman for an equipment company. All of that can be true. But once again, as far as how they build legacy is in that area. And so I will encourage you, because I think Martha and I found this to be true. Our kids became way more interested in how we were building long-term legacy than we thought. And they became very, engaged in understanding some things about note investing, because they could see that would be a future that could affect them. And I would say that, you don't have to start out with a pile of money to build legacy, but you do have to have either money or know how to be creative.
That's correct. Yeah. And so what we can do is we can teach them that and open up their world to that, because, young people nowadays, it's tougher, and retirement is going to be different for them than it is for us. And so they need to think more creatively about that.
I think the way we think of traditional retirement, the way our parents maybe looked at that, I think that's not going to be a truth looking forward, at least for our kids. And so, if we don't learn this, we may not be financially where we need to be if we just try to use retirement strategies of the past. And I think that's what you've talked about, right? That's where you're looking at and kind of your vision of doing it. If I ask you just off the top of your head, and you're just kind of thinking about this, right? Like you've done a number of different things. You've loaned private money. You've loaned hard money on deals. You bought some loans that were in default in the past. Now you've had rental properties. You love those things. You love those air conditioner calls, right? What is it that you're looking forward to with notes to give you some peace that maybe hadn't been quite so easy in the past?
Long term, it is really for the cash flow, so that, I don't have to worry that I can pay those bills. It's just coming in like clockwork every month. The bills coming out are all automatic, and I don't really even have to think about it. So that's kind of a segment of that is the cash flow, but also the wealth building part as well, so that we can sort of stack them up. And so as we get older and we want to work less, or we want to pursue more traveling or whatever, we have the means to do that.
Yeah. It makes a freedom number obtainable, because everybody has a freedom number. Like what makes you financially free? And it doesn't mean that, like I'm 65 years old and I still work in the business, and people say, why don't you retire? And I'm like, I suck at fixing stuff. Like my wife loves her house and her yard. She loves it. But she can come up with a laundry list of stuff that I just am not good at. Right. And I love getting up here and working on notes every day. So I don't why would I go race home to go chase something that I'm not near as good at as what I do here? And of course, we still love to travel and have fun. And you'll probably do the same thing. You'll probably never, quote, just shut it down. But as long as you can have freedom and look back and think that you can teach your girls responsible investing. And as they continue to mature in their life, and then their kids and all that stuff becomes an obtainable legacy. My kids are now third generation in the business because Martha and I learned it from her dad. Note portfolios are way more inheritable than rental portfolios. You agree with that?
I agree. And the reason is because when you look at the generation now, is they don't want rental properties. They look at them as just headaches. What they want is the cash, right? They're looking for that cash, and then they're looking at how they can take that cash and then grow that. So.
Yeah, and we have listeners in our audience. They don't have rentals, so they can't relate to all that you're talking about with kind of aggravation of rentals. Because I started in the business and I went straight into notes in 1980. I didn't start out in rentals. I did end up owning some rentals along the way, and I exited those because I liked what I'd already learned a lot better than what I was learning with rentals, right? I liked the notes that I'd already learned how to do before I got to the next phase. Was I thought, okay, well, everybody says have rentals, I got to do that. Well, that wasn't my ultimate dream as it turned out. So I'm kind of back to that. Joe, I'm going to let you come on here and close us out. Kathleen has had quite a story.
So I just wanted to say, Eddie, you showed us that big, beautiful, awards you got, and I got the participation trophy here.
Yeah.
Kathleen, you've got a great story. That is certainly an interesting market you live in, but when you can invest in places like Indiana or Ohio or California or Texas or even Florida, that makes all the difference in the world. And who doesn't like wealth building and cash flow, right?
That is correct.
All right. So we look forward to seeing you either at Summer Summit or at Note Expo in the fall. So thanks so much for that. Guys, thanks for being with us this week. Just another great Note School story. Brand new, already bought her first note, enjoying $1,500 a month in cash flow on an $80,000 investment. I think there's nobody on here that wouldn't take that every day of the week and twice on Sundays, right? So also next week we have Fred and Tracy Rui and from noteinvestor.com, and they are going to share with us the newest stats on what seller financing look like in 2024. These stats always have to be a little later because obviously you got to wrap up the year, and then it takes Tracy and Fred a while to compile those. But yeah, we'll have those next week. She'll share those with us, her and Fred. That's it. We'll see you same place, same time next week, at 11:05 Central Time. Have a great rest of your week.